Imagine an army, 500,000 strong. Their march shakes the frozen earth. A relentless tide of steel, destined to crush everything in its path. But their greatest fear isn't a wall of fire or a rain of shells. Their nightmare is a ghost, a phantom waiting in the silence, a man buried deep beneath the ice, armed with a vintage rifle, a steady heart, and an iron will that could shatter glaciers. This is the legend of Simo Häyhä, a humble farmer who became the deadliest shadow to ever walk a battlefield. They called him the White Death, a singular force that brought an empire to a standstill, one cold bullet at a time. The year is 1939. A brutal winter descends. A massive invading force strikes deep into the heart of Finland, expecting an easy victory. They thought it would be over in days. They had the numbers. They had the tanks. They had the absolute certainty of conquest. But they didn't have the forest. They didn't have the cold. And they certainly weren't prepared for the men who called this hell home. Among the defenders stood Simo, a quiet man, unassuming, standing barely 5 feet tall. Yet within him burned the fire of a titan. The invaders marched in dark green, targets against a world of white. Simo vanished. He became the snow itself, draped in heavy camouflage. He wasn't just hiding, he was an extension of the wilderness, a silent predator in a kingdom of frost, where every breath was a gamble. He rejected the modern scope. Glass glares in the sun. Glare means death. Simo trusted his eyes and his cold iron sights. A scope forces the head higher, a fatal mistake. Simo stayed low, level with the earth, a shadow that refused to be seen. He relied on instinct, mastery born from years in the wild. He and his rifle were one single lethal instrument of survival. The temperature crashed to -40, a cold so absolute it turns breath into ice and courage into brittle glass. In this frozen furnace, Simo rose before the sun, dressed in white, carrying his canvas-wrapped rifle into the heart of the storm. He would pack the snow in front of his position, hard, solid. He poured water over it, creating a shell of pure ice, not just for cover, but to kill the muzzle blast, to ensure no puff of snow would ever betray his hidden location. He took a handful of freezing snow and put it in his mouth to kill the steam of his breath. Total, absolute silence. He lay motionless for hours, slowing his heart, becoming nothing more than a drift of snow in a forest that wanted everyone dead. Then the invaders would come, oblivious, walking directly into the gaze of a man who never missed, a man who waited. The rifle cracks, an officer drops. Panic spreads like a virus. The soldiers scramble, firing at trees, at shadows, at nothing. They scream into the woods. They waste their lead on ghosts. But Simo is already looking for his next mark. He doesn't move. He doesn't panic. He simply waits for the chaos to settle, for the next target to step into the light. Another shot, another fall. The terror begins to freeze their blood faster than the winter air. The White Death was here. They realized they weren't fighting an army. They were being hunted by a demon made of ice, a phantom they couldn't touch. The legend grew. Whispers filled the enemy camps, stories of a monster that couldn't be killed, a shadow that owned the forest. Morale didn't just drop, it shattered. Soldiers refused to stand. They feared the very air they breathed. Every sound was a threat. The high command was humiliated. An entire advance halted by one man, one rifle, one unbreakable spirit in the deep white. Desperate, they sent their elites, the counter-snipers, men trained to kill the best. They were sent to hunt the phantom. It became a deadly game of cat and mouse, 2 hunters, 1 forest. A silent duel where the first mistake is the last. But Simo knew the woods better than his own name. He read the silence. He listened to the shadows. He was the master. Hours turned into an agonizing wait. The Soviet sniper scanned the ridges, his eye pressed to the glass, searching for a flicker. Simo didn't move a muscle. He waited for the sun to move. He waited for the slight glare on the enemy's scope. There, a flash, a single inch of movement. That was all Simo needed. The iron sights lined up. The triggers stayed steady. The counter-sniper fell before he even heard the shot. The White Death remained supreme. The hunter was dead. The legend lived. The enemy commanders lost their minds. If they couldn't find him, they would erase the entire forest from the map. They called in the heavy guns. Massive artillery barrages rained down fire on every square inch of the frozen woodland. The earth screamed. Trees were turned into splinters. The white snow was stained black with ash in the fury of war. A relentless storm of steel, a fire meant to obliterate everything. They thought no human could survive that mountain of metal. But when the smoke cleared and the silence returned, the forest was still there, and so was the ghost. From the blackened ruins, the crack of his rifle returned, a signal to the invaders. The White Death is still watching. The count reached impossible heights. 100, 300, 500, a number that defied the laws of war. He wasn't looking for glory. He wasn't looking for medals. He was just a man doing a job, protecting his home. He understood the geometry of death. He used the cold as a weapon. He used the terrain as a fortress. He was untouchable. When the enemy got close, he switched to his submachine gun, a blur of white and lead, a tactician at every range. 500 confirmed kills, a record written in the snow, a record that will never, ever be broken. Every day he walked into the abyss, knowing the odds were against him, knowing the world was watching the tiny giant. He became the soul of a nation, the living proof that determination can overcome an empire. A hero born from frost. His presence alone changed the war. Entire divisions moved with fear, terrified of the sectors where the snow stayed quiet. But the cost of war is always paid in blood, even for a legend, even for a ghost who seemed immortal. March 6, 1940. The fighting reached a fever pitch, a chaotic, desperate struggle for every inch of the Karelian forest. Simo was there, holding the line, his rifle singing its deadly song against a wave of invading infantry. Suddenly, a flash, a lucky shot from a desperate soldier, an explosive round aimed blindly into the white. The world exploded. The impact shattered his jaw. It tore through the myth. Simo Häyhä was down. The snow turned red. He lay still. The phantom had finally been struck. The invincible sniper was motionless in the very snow he once ruled. He was presumed dead, tossed among the fallen. A tragic end for the man who had become a god of the winter. His comrades carried him through the chaos. A somber march. The heart of the Finnish defense seemed to stop beating. But then, a twitch, a breath. The soldier holding the stretcher froze. The White Death was still fighting. He was alive. They rushed him to a field hospital, a ghost clinging to the edge of the world. He slipped into a deep, dark coma. The invaders celebrated. They thought the nightmare was over. They thought they could finally breathe without fear. For a week, Simo fought his own war, an internal battle against the darkness. His body was broken, but his soul was iron. The doctors worked in the dim light, reconstructing a face that had seen the end of the world. A man between two lives. March 13th, 1940. Simo Häyhä opened his eyes. He returned from the shadows, waking to a world that had changed. In a twist of fate, the war ended that very day. The peace treaty was signed. The guns finally went silent. The border was redrawn. Finland had stood its ground. They had survived the impossible. They had kept their soul. Simo's war was over, but his recovery was just beginning. 26 surgeries, years of pain, a face forever altered. He carried the scars with pride, a visible map of his sacrifice, a permanent reminder of the price of freedom. He never bragged. He never sought the spotlight. When the world asked how he did it, he had one answer: practice. One word, no ego, just the cold, hard truth of a master who did what had to be done. He went back to the earth, back to his farm, a quiet life among the forests he had once defended with his life. He lived to the age of 96, a long, peaceful life, breeding dogs, hunting, finding beauty in the silence. His story isn't just about a rifle. It's about the power of focus, the strength of the individual against the machine. The White Death proved that strategy, discipline, and courage can rewrite history itself. He showed that one man, if he is brave enough, can shift the balance of the world. There are no grand statues of destruction, only the quiet memory of a nation that will never forget its guardian. His name is taught in every academy, a masterpiece of tactical brilliance, the ultimate study in environmental warfare. The Phantom of the Snow is immortal, a legend that whispers through the trees every time the winter wind blows. A humble farmer who picked up a rifle, faced an empire, and won, the ultimate warrior. This was the saga of Simo Häyhä, the deadliest man to ever walk the ice, the man who became the White Death.